Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webcast. I'm Deanne Gage, reporter with Globe Advisor, and I'm pleased to be moderating today's discussion. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that the Globe and Mail's headquarters are situated on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. My colleagues and I are grateful for the opportunity to live and work on this land. Middle-aged individuals caring for aging parents and their own children are commonly referred to as a sandwich generation. With multiple pressures impacting their time, finances, and overall wellness, this segment of the population is increasingly burned out, with less time and resources to plan for their futures. Women, who typically take on more caregiving compared with men, are often at the center of this balancing act. Today, we will be discussing key financial considerations for women in the sandwich generation, along with strategies to plan and prepare. We aren't anticipating any technical issues, but we appreciate your patience should any arise. During the last 10 minutes of the program, we will be answering audience questions. If you have any questions for our speakers, please type them into the virtual Q&A box. On behalf of the Globe and Mail, I would like to recognize Richardson Wealth for supporting today's event. I'd now like to introduce you to today's speakers. Joining me, we have Sarah Widmeyer, Senior Vice President of Wealth Strategies at Richardson Wealth. We have clinical psychologist Kati Kamkar. And finally, Claire Webster, certified dementia care consultant, former caregiver, and the founder of McGill University's Dementia Education Program. Claire is also the founder of Caregiver Crosswalk, Inc. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us.
Nice to be here.
All right, let's get started. Can you each tell us about what you do as it relates to today's topic? And let's start with Claire.
Well, thank you for inviting me today. And as a former caregiver, I knew absolutely nothing about dementia. My mother had Alzheimer's disease, and I was your typical sandwich generation caregiver. And I really went into it without being educated on the illness, about the resources, or the financial impact. And as a result of my journey, I went on a really crusade to become an advocate about the importance of education and how to be prepared when you're really confronted with this type of illness. So that's why I'm here today.
Welcome. Kati?
Thank you. And I'm also so happy and excited to be part of such an important event. Thank you for having me. Well, the reasons are very diverse, but if I might just speak about that, of course, in my role as a clinical psychologist, I often see people facing a variety, a host of stressors and challenges, including, of course, how to manage here our personal and professional demands. And so when we look at the sandwich generation, particularly here women, they often seek out help when they feel overwhelmed by the dual responsibility of caring for aging parents while also managing their own families and their careers. So fostering realistic expectations, developing healthy view of self, sense of self-worth, engaging in our self-care and time for self, reframing negative thoughts and improving our mental health, and promoting a healthy work-life balance are common themes that we generally explore. And of course, I'm involved in a host of community events and speaking engagement and public service. And often, again, we see this intersection of mental health, the financial well-being, and the caregiving role.
Thank you very much. And now, Sarah.
So I would introduce myself by saying, first, I'm a daughter, a sister, an aunt, a sister-in-law, a mother, a wife, and a friend. I've recently lost both of my parents after a caregiving period of time, my dad to a prolonged battle with cancer, and my mom to Alzheimer's. I also have two young adult daughters, one at university and one just graduated and starting on her own career path. So on a very personal level for me, I've survived being in the sandwich generation in a very unbalanced way. I've experienced the burnout, the depression, the self-destructive habits, the guilt of never being in the right place at the right time or never giving enough. I would also say that professionally, I head up wealth management at our firm, Richardson Wealth. So I'm responsible for the products, the services, the strategies that our advisors use in helping their clients achieve investment and wealth management goals. I've been very focused on women as clients over the last decade and a half. We think about money in different ways. We have different needs, concerns. Our expectations of how we want to be served in wealth management often differ from our male counterparts. Why is this so critically important? I'm going to give you some facts. The average age of widowhood in Canada is 56. 56. That means that in all probability, we will solely be in charge of our own financial affairs at some point in our lives. In fact, 9 out of 10 women will be solely in charge of their own financial outcomes. We live longer than men. Average lifespan of Canadian men is 80 years. For women, it's 84, which means our wealth needs need to last longer than men. Unfortunately, women are the primary sufferers of dementia. Over 70% of the cases of dementia are women. So we may be incapacitated in the last years of our lives. From a planning perspective, some of our last years may be the most expensive ones. I'll give you one more. Over 50% of boomer women, so demographically, that's the large cohort of women that are in retirement now or approaching it, have less than $10,000 in retirement savings. That implies a whole host of outcomes, not the least of which is that our parents' dependency on us for financial support may intensify.
Wow, those are really sobering numbers. Do you see, Sarah, do you see this sandwich generation getting bigger as mothers are having kids later in life?
For sure. I think that's for certain. As women are entering the workforce and establishing careers, we are putting off childbearing events. And in fact, 71% of the sandwich generation are middle-aged right now. I also know that adult children are staying home longer than before. I was off to school at 18 and then stayed in Toronto to build my career. Back then, I shared a condo and paid $500 a month. Now, with housing and rental costs as high as they are, adult children are moving back home after university to help ease the costs of living as they start off on their own career paths.
Great. Patty, any insights on that?
I entirely agree. We are seeing definitely the societal trends toward later motherhood, as we have again noted, as women delay childbirth due to career aspirations, also educational goals or personal choice. They often find themselves again raising young children at a time when their parents are entering old age and might require more intensive care. So this dual caregiving role has become more prevalent and is expected to increase as again lifespans lengthen and health issues also become more complex for aging parents. So it is, I think we want to also appreciate that this dynamic brings that additional stress here as women are tasked with juggling multiple roles, mother, daughter, employee, and often also a leader in the community. So as mothers are having children later in their life, they're frequently at the peak of their careers when caregiving responsibilities might increase. And then that can also then create tension between professional growth and family obligations. And for many, it's the lack of also adequate social and financial support that can really, really exacerbate these challenges. And they often seek, again, external help to manage the workloads.
Claire, has this been your experience as well?
Well, my experience is that the age of the sandwich generation that I work with is actually in their 60s. You know, we think of sandwich generation as people in their 40s, but in fact, thanks to modern medicine, people are living much older. So people that are developing dementia are generally in their mid 80s to 90s. Therefore, their kids are in their 60s. And, there are oftentimes these kids, and I would like to consider myself as a kid as I'm getting closer to 60, but, they're at a time in their life, many of them were there, they were hoping to actually enjoy some of their retirement, but they have a parent that is still living who's in their late 90s, approaching 100. And so that responsibility of care is now going on their shoulders as well.
That was my experience as well. When I was a young caregiver, well, younger, I was in my 40s, but certainly all of my peers in the long-term care facility were in their 60s and older. So interesting. Now, women often focus on being caregivers and they forget to care for themselves. What are the impacts of this? Let's start with you again, Claire.
Oh, that's an easy one for me because I guess Sarah and I have a lot in common. I experienced what we call the emotional burnout. We think that we could do it all. I was, once upon a time, I thought I wore a cape and that I was a superwoman. And I was always one of those people that kept saying, no, thanks, I don't need any help. But really, the challenge is that we lose the ability to be able to set boundaries. And we suffer from that emotional burnout, which results in using, bad coping mechanisms such as drinking too much, smoking too much, Ativan, eating, et cetera, et cetera. And then we kind of also, you end up losing your identity. Your role becomes that of a caregiver. And I work with a lot of families whereby like oftentimes it's the daughter. They've installed, for example, cameras in the care homes, and they're not sleeping because they're spending all the days watching the cameras of their parents, whether it's in the home or whether it's in a long-term care, and they're just losing themselves, right? And then inevitably the emotional burnout could really turn into a physical burnout where it takes a crisis in our own physical health before we finally seek help.
Thank you. Kathy, any insights?
Absolutely. And again, this is again what we are saying, and thank you so much for sharing these consequences, okay, of not being able to prioritize here, even think about our self-care can be profound here, particularly for women in the sandwich generation. So emotionally, constantly prioritizing the needs of others can lead to a host of feelings of exhaustion here, resentment sometimes, and even depression. So when caregivers don't allow themselves time to recharge, as we also call this emotional resiliency, turning the me time, the off duty time, then what we often see also is that their ability to provide care might also diminish over time. So which can again in turn affect the quality of our relationships with both could be our aging parents and children. And they might also become more susceptible, as again as noted here, absolutely, to burnout, which as we know is a condition characterized by exhaustion. And when we say exhaustion, it could be emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion, psychological exhaustion. But physically also, it sets the increasing the likelihood of sometimes experiencing a range of health problems. So from sleep deprivation to chronic stress, our immune system can become more weak, and those can also increase the risk for heart issues and musculoskeletal problems and so on. So those long-term impact effects in relation to not being able really to prioritize and set the me time and personal health can become concerning and compound over time and making recovery even harder when again with the increasing age.
Thank you. Sarah, do you have anything to add to this comment?
Well, I certainly do. Financially, this can be devastating. It's estimated that caregivers spend about $7,200 per year on caregiving. Plus, additional money is spent on household-related bills, groceries, repairs. Increasingly, caregivers are picking up mortgage payments, rent payments, and financing home modifications. That's the hard cost. It's also estimated that caregivers spend about 1,350 unpaid hours. Okay, think about that for a minute. There's no more hours in a day. There's still only 24 hours in the day. So those hours are coming at the cost of other things, which might be, hours at work, hours at home, self-care, as the other two have spoken about. So, hours at work. unfortunately, women still make only about 83 cents on every 100 cents that a man makes. We've certainly gotten better at it, but it's still only 83 cents. We are the ones primarily that take time off to care for children and to care for elderly parents. So we have less time to accumulate wealth. And it is just so important. One of the things that I've talked about is financial wellness is self-care. It's the first form of self-care, and it's critically, critically important.
So if you are putting on your own mask before on yourself before anyone else. This dovetails nicely, Sarah, into my next question. I'd like to do more of a deep dive into managing finances and the sandwich generation. You've mentioned a figure, but I mean, there's only so much money. So how do you manage all of that?
Right. So there's a number of things that you can do, and I would say, some of the first things you should do is, as you said, put on your own oxygen mask first. It's a great analogy, but it works. You've got to look after yourself first financially before you can look after anybody else. There's a couple of basics. I'd say there's 5 basics. Have an emergency fund. 6 months of your expenses should be covered in a savings account. So sit down, go through what those expenses are, and put 6 months of them worth in a savings account, because things happen. Look after your own retirement savings first. Pay yourself first. The easiest way to do this is on a monthly savings routine. You'd be surprised how much just a little bit a month adds up. Look into the government benefit programs. There's the Canada Child Benefit. There's OAS and GIS supplements for the elderly. There's EI caregiving benefits if you need to take time off work. There's disability tax credits for the elderly. Simplify your expenses. Put as many of your payments as you can on automated bill payments, so you don't even have to think about it. You don't even have to think about the missed payments. Review your insurance needs and options. Insurance is cheapest to buy when you think you need it the least. At the end, there's no executor or beneficiary who's ever said, I've got too much insurance. And honestly, my best advice is to work with a financial advisor who knows all of this, so you don't have to think about it, and they can help you look after this and for you and your family.
Okay. I'd like to turn to Kathy now. What role does financial well-being play in mental health?
Thank you. And I really like the examples that Sarah did mention, because it's interesting, because what we also know through research literature is that financial well-being and our mental health are actually deeply interconnected. And this, of course, especially for women in the sandwich generation. So when our financial resources are stretched thin due to combined, host of reasons, combined responsibilities of caring for aging parents and supporting children and so on, the resulting stress, we know, can lead to symptoms related to anxiety, depression, and also overall mental fatigue. And the constant worry, right? Constant worry about meeting financial obligations can also create this chronic stress response, leading to both, in turn, mental and physical health challenges. So a lack of financial security, we know, can exacerbate feelings of helplessness, I feel that I don't have any control, I feel helpless, I feel powerless, and limit access to necessary also self-care resources, such as maybe mental health resources, time off, or even everyday necessities that can help us to reduce stress. So women who constantly worried about paying their parents' medical expenses or their children educational costs often again place their own financial planning and mental health needs really on the back burner. So over time, again, this can result in this significant emotional strain and again increasing the likelihood of a burnout or again a host of health concerns. But on the flip side, we also know that financial well-being provides a sense of security, a sense of control, which is again critical to our mental health. And when women take steps to ensure their financial stability, and the examples that Sarah mentioned are absolutely fantastic, for sure, through budgeting and savings, your financial advisor and so on, accessing financial planning resources, they tend, we know that they tend to reduce stress. It provides us with a perception of control, and it is gaining control over the self, over our life. And of course, it's going to have an impact on our mental health. So, and that mental clarity as well allows to better care also, not only for the self, but also for family and managing our challenges better.
Okay, I'd like to turn to Claire now. What are the costs associated with caring for loved ones who need assistance? There are different types of care, from home care to long-term care homes, for example.
So my area of expertise is really in the field of dementia, and I'll talk about some of the costs, and and I'll talk about the Quebec example. It may be the same across the country, but basically, for sure, finances are probably one of the biggest stress with families, because once they receive a diagnosis and understand the evolution of the disease, as the more the disease evolves, the more care that will be needed, and people come and say like, "Oh my God, I'm like, how am we going to afford this care?" So basically, the way it works is that people that are dependent upon the public healthcare system, there's a long waiting list. They have to get a social worker to come and be assessed, and the public healthcare system may provide about few hours a week, but inevitably people need to hire a home care professional home care if they want to stay at home. And after COVID, the prices of home care per hour really increased. So you're looking at a ballpark of anywhere from $36 to $38 an hour. And by the time the disease has really evolved, people need to have at least 8 hours of care a day. So you're looking at something like $2,000 a week, for home care. When we look at private residences, there aren't too many that are specialized in true dementia care, but those that are available, you go in at maybe at approximately $6,000 a month. That's just for like midstream services. But by the time the disease has evolved, you're looking at about $13,000 a month in the private system, right? So there's only about 1% of the population that can afford it. So most people are waiting to go into the public healthcare system. Now the challenge with that, it's about a 2-year waiting list to go into the public system, and that's probably about $2,500 a month. And again, as Sarah mentioned, it's really about finding out what are those tax credits available per province. The only other thing I would like to say is that some people decide that they want to hire maybe their own, perhaps a former housekeeper could become a caregiver. But then what ends up happening is that the family becomes like a human resource manager, right? By the time the disease has progressed, you really need about 3 people around the clock. So it's probably more preferable to go to an agency, because although the cost is higher, you have somebody managing the employees for you.
Sarah, did you
Very
want to jump
expensive
in?
disease.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
very.
mean, I don't know that I have a whole lot more to add to Claire's, but I would say in Toronto, and again, it varies as Claire mentioned by region, but in Toronto, caregivers get paid about a little over $15 an hour. Now that's just basic care. If it is nursing or care through the night, that rate can go from 35 to over $60 an hour. So it really becomes expensive, which means on an annualized basis, you're looking at anywhere from 35,000 a year to $150,000 a year, depending on the level of care that you're bringing into the house. I can speak personally that my mom, in COVID, which is a whole different story, went into a private retirement residence that specialized in dementia care. So initially she was paying about $5,000 a month. Now this is not in Toronto. This was in a smaller region. And it really wasn't a lot of care because she was really quite independent still at that point. So it was really rent and meals and someone checking in. But in the end, when she passed from Alzheimer's, it had climbed to almost 15,000 a month, and that was incredibly expensive. Now, thank goodness, my parents had a great pension. They had both been teachers, so there was a very good pension stream, and they had saved and planned. But it was shocking how expensive it was in the end.
Oh, you're on mute.
My apologies. Sarah, I just wanted to follow up. Were they using the sale of their home to fund this, or their assets?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Thank you for raising that. Yes, we did sell the house. The transitioning mom to a retirement home was a bit of a surprise for her. We had been trying to get her out for a couple of years. It felt like after a couple of grease fires and other things in the house. Finally, my poor mom fell and broke her wrist, and that was the catalyst to get her into the home. So while she was in the home, we were able to prepare the house and sell the house, which certainly helped in financing her at the end of her run.
Thank you. I'd like to turn back to Katie to discuss resilience. Sorry, Katie. What tips and strategies do you have for boosting resilience during trying times such as this?
I love the topic of resilience. It's one of my expertise. I can really speak here for like the entire day, 10 hours on resilience. So the hardest part is I'm going to really keep it at 1 minute here because it's so important, and also really how we define resilience. But it is key here. And I think everything we have been talking about actually does contribute to our resilience, the knowledge and our action plan and coming up with resources and support as strength. That's really the foundation of resiliency. And resiliency is also not a one-time event, it's an ongoing process. So how can I navigate? I'm going up, but there are ups and ups and downs, but always around grasping here my strength, my positives and support and resources so I can navigate the process. But here is of course so prominent here in the sandwich generation as can people navigate here, women navigate multiple roles and responsibilities. So one important strategy for boosting resilience is really cultivating here a strong support network. So whether it can be relying on a family or a friend, professional network, but really sharing also, it could be the emotional or any practical load and struggle with others can help, can very much help. This quality support, just having someone to listen to us, because caregiving does not have to be always done in isolation. So asking for help, delegating tasks, creating boundaries can also be very much proactive steps toward maintaining our emotional strength. Another powerful strategy is again, is very individualized. Okay, I should have said that from the beginning. It's an individualized approach to our self-care and resiliency, but mindfulness and self-compassion. So taking time each day to reflect on our experiences, practicing gratitude, counting our positives and our successes, and engaging in short, again, any mindfulness exercise that can help us, because it helps also to lower the stress, boost our immune system, and also increase our emotional stability as well. Because resilience comes from recognizing that challenges are part of also life, and giving ourselves also giving oneself the space to process and also recover from potential setbacks. And nothing can be done without self-compassion. So a lot of times people say, no, I don't deserve self-compassion. I'm not the best person. I should have done this and that. Well, self-compassion it helps us to avoid that harsh self-judgment, and encourages us actually to have a balanced approach to caregiving. We also say, the growth mindset, resiliency is how can I move forward? Well, moving forward is really having a realistic evaluation of myself based on today. If my thoughts on myself are too negative, then I'm removing myself from reality. If my thoughts on myself are too positive, then I also remove myself from reality. So it's really having a better appreciation of the present and current time, this healthy view of myself, putting everything to perspective that I can work on my growth and self-compassion, and obviously resiliency. And all the great strategies here mentioned by Sarah and Claire, I would lump them all into a resiliency package. Again, I can talk for 10 hours. So
Katie, if I can add, one of the things that I said to myself, and maybe it'll be helpful to others, is be kind to yourself. We say be kind to others, but honestly, be kind to yourself, because it's so easy to heap on the guilt.
huge part of self-compassion.
That's a really great point. Um, I want to turn now to family dynamics because sometimes that's why you need these soft skills, these soft resilient skills to make it through. Claire, what
Mhm.
strains do you see being put on family dynamics, like in relation to caring for multiple generations?
This is a topic I could talk to for an hour about. So I always insist when I do Zoom consults with family members, and I really insist that everybody is together despite which country they live in. And that's what's great about Zoom, because the strains come when the sibling or the person that is living in the same city and caring for that person often feels like, well, I'm doing everything because my brother or sister or somebody is not in the same city, right? And so there's a lot of resentment that comes in. Also, the other strains are, if you're caring for somebody that you don't like, it could be a son or daughter that is now put into a situation where they become to a parent that they don't like, or a spouse that they don't like. I had a gentleman even reach out to me a couple months ago to say, Mrs. Webster, I'm in my late 80s. I still have my health. My wife is just diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, but I just can't do it. I need to divorce her. So can you help me make a care plan, because I just can't do this. And I see a lot of that. I see a lot of people feeling like this anger, resentment towards the disease. Cultural beliefs come into play also. Depending on people's different cultural communities, they feel like the son or daughter should move in with the family, or the family member who has a disease should move in with the grown-up children. And I've seen where parents have said to their kids, if you ever think of transitioning me to a long-term care, I'm going to disinherit you. So there's a lot of dynamics. And when it comes to money, sometimes the more money or wealth a person has, the more complicated that could be, where there's maybe a stepmother or a stepfather or stepchildren involved. People aren't communicating well. And also dynamics come when people don't understand the nature of the illness. With a disease like dementia that is incredibly complex, everybody has to understand the evolution of the disease. Everybody has to understand the care plan, and really share the responsibilities. Maybe somebody's taking care of the finances, and somebody else is taking care of the medical care, and somebody's taking care of the home and all the properties. But I see that the families that I work with, oftentimes the more money that's involved, the more dynamics and challenges that exist, unfortunately.
Hmm. And a situation like that can easily lead to burnout. Kathy, what are some key features of burnout?
Yeah, which is so important. And actually, some years ago, back in 2019, I'd actually also written an article on burnout for the general publication, because it's so important to raise awareness. And it's a lot of misunderstanding around burnout. But we know through research literature that burnout is a distinct concept from depression and anxiety. Of course, it could lead to depression and anxiety. Depression and anxiety can lead to burnout, etc., etc. But it's a distinct concept from depression and anxiety. And of course, more and more research is needed to have a better appreciation of burnout. But it's always helpful to also look at it from on a continuum, like most things, on a continuum from, let's say, I had a heavy day and I'm tired, I'm going home, I'm going to engage in those, let's say, alternate activities, restoring activities, and I'm able to recover and bounce back. And the next day I'm starting my day. To the other end, which is I cannot recover. Okay. So the sooner we intervene, the better it is and the easier it is to obviously to address and to treat burnout. But it is characterized by mainly three features. Again, the emotional, mental, physical exhaustion we talked about, then also the cynicism and depersonalization, and the reduced personal accomplishment or reduced sense of self-efficacy. So what all those mean here, especially in this context here, is often it occurs over prolonged periods of intense stress or caregiving here. And so one of the key feature is lumped to what I just talked about is this emotional detachment from myself or from others. So I feel emotionally distant, which if we also look at it, then burnout also becomes a grief, a loss, because we often then don't recognize the self anymore. So people say, I don't understand, like I used to care and now now I feel nothing. And then they feel upset, more upset and ashamed and guilt because they're feeling this way. So individuals feel numb or distant from the responsibilities or relationships. And so that this emotional disconnection can lead, of course, a sense of helplessness, making it even more difficult at times to provide care to self or others, or even engaging in this meaningful activities. Then the other part, another feature here we talked about, is this fatigue, this chronic fatigue, difficulty to really recover. And so no matter how much rest people can get, is that they may struggle again to find the motivation to perform even routine tasks. And so this physical exhaustion is compounded by, of course, this mental fatigue. Even making decisions, right, problem solving can seem overwhelming. And cognitive symptoms, right, like forgetfulness, difficulty focusing, concentrating, also common in burnout. And they reflect again the high level of stress sustained over time. And one other feature here, very important, as I mentioned, is this reduced personal accomplishment, self-efficacy. So people say, I don't understand. I used to do it so well before, maybe for the past 5 years, for the past 10 years. Now I don't feel confident I'm able to do this. So that's again another loss. And we lose trust in the self. And there's this lowered self-confidence, self-efficacy. And often, yes, this is what we hear again. Women in the sandwich generation may begin to question even their ability to manage all the responsibilities, and leading to this negative self-perception and feelings of failure.
Hmm. And what steps can someone take toward recovery if they're in that mode?
Very important. So again, as I mentioned, it works on the continuum. So always about recognizing that even when we talk about stress, we often think stress is psychological, yes, but there's always the mind-body connection. Health is our social health, our mental health, and our physical health. So again, looking at it from a continuum, what is it that I can always do in terms of caring for myself, caring for others, putting up an action plan, and working on rejuvenating and my emotional resiliency, so that we don't go along down that path. So one step is really, again, acknowledging it, that yes, I do need to take care of myself, set time for myself, in addition to a host of other things. But then it's also seeking support, as we talked about, because women often, they're aware that they feel overwhelmed. They might push themselves through the exhaustion, but it's really recognizing that I need to rest here, and maybe I need to delegate tasks. Maybe I need to also engage in external help here for my recovery. And that might involve, speaking with a healthcare provider, or reaching out to a mental health professional, or simply also discussing our challenges with a trusted friend or family. But also creating boundaries is an essential step. So as I always say, how can I create emotional boundaries, cognitive boundaries? Because many women here, again, in the sandwich generation, they might feel obligated to take care of all the caregiving responsibilities themselves. And however, recovery, as we know, requires learning also sometimes how to say no to maybe additional tasks, or also prioritizing our personal time. So establishing maybe boundaries, it could be at work, at home, within extended family dynamics, can create the space needed for emotional and our physical recovery. Again, it's always around trial and error, but working towards that process. And that can sometimes, again, involve arranging for alternative caregiving options, or discussing flexible work arrangements with employers. But these are very elements to consider. And lastly here, incorporating self-care routine, but in our daily routines, essentially, very important, whether it is relaxation, our mental peace, quiet walk, grabbing a book, and normalizing it. Often people say, no, I should be doing this and that. No. Normalizing it. If not, the body is going to stop it for me. My body will stop it for me.
Thank you. Very enlightening. Claire, do you have a take on this as well? When is it time to seek help?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm somebody who suffered a really severe burnout, and I would say that the warning signs began with anger, like really extreme anger. I mean, I that was my emotion, and but when the anger becomes like a light switch, that it's just, you flick from one state of mind to another so quickly. So increased anger, definitely increased alcohol. So, I remember picking up my kids from school at 4:30, opening up that bottle of wine, one bottle became 2 bottles, and then some online shopping, increase in online shopping. Then it continues, right? Because you get into this cycle of, okay, you feel guilty because the way you spoke to your kids or your husband and how angry you got. And then, then you drink and you wake up the next morning and then you feel this unbelievable shame, but then you start to cycle all over again, right? And then in my case, it turned into some even like suicidal thoughts. And I want to be clear that, all of this doesn't just stem from caregiving, right? It's our life's traumas, our life's experiences that perhaps we didn't deal with in the past that come forward, right? Like as women, we are like Sarah said, we're friends, we're mothers, we're daughters, but my husband had his own issues, he had his own things, right? So it was like the icing on the cake. When you have a burnout, it's not just because of the caregiving, it's because of everything coming together. And I was actually diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, because then I started to have a lot of shakes. And in order to recover, I did have to seek a medical attention, psychological attention. But I think one of the most important strategies for me that I decided to do was really, when we talk about setting boundaries, I really had to let go of people, projects, and commitments that were no longer serving me. And sometimes in life there are certain family members that we still need to see, but perhaps people could have a lunch instead of a dinner. Instead of saying yes to dinners with certain friends, you can maybe just have a coffee. But I really, really, really had to do a triage in my life of people and projects that were no longer serving me. And I have to say that my mom passed away in 2016, but that's exactly how I live my life today. I really set certain boundaries for myself.
Great, thank you. Sarah, what conversation should people be having with their parents around financial and estate planning? What kinds of questions should they be asking during these conversations?
Great question. I think the first and most simplest thing I can tell you is please have the conversation. We don't like talking about the end. We don't like talking about what happens next. We don't like talking about money with our parents. So if I can get one thing across today, it's just please have the conversation. It is difficult to initiate, but it's critical for everyone to have it. And the relief that everyone will feel after it is massive. Your parents likely want to have the conversation with you, but they're afraid to have it. They don't want to talk about the end. My daughters sent me a quote that spoke to them. They said, "Be kind to your mom. This is her first time living too. There's no playbook for this. This is everyone's first time living this day, this moment, this age. Just have the conversation." So there really is no right way to do it. Just start having the conversation. The things that you want to find out in the conversation is if there's a will and can you read it? There's no movie set where, we all get called into a room to read the last will and testament of mom and dad. Have it now. Read it, understand what their wishes are. I mean, why leave that conversation to something you have to interpret in a will? Why did I get mom's wedding china? Why didn't my sister get it? You have the conversation now. Understand why certain things are bequeathed to certain people. Have they completed a power of attorney? Do you have a copy of it? Have you read it? Do you understand it? So you want to know if there's a will, you want to know if there's a power of attorney. And if neither or one of them is and one of them isn't, then get those things done. Who are the executors? There's a whole nother conversation we could have about being an executor. My mom passed in November of 22. My brother and I are co-executors. We are still finalizing her estate. It is, and it's a simple estate. Being an executor is a very big job for people to take on, but understand who are the executors and why. Where are the assets? Who are the advisors? Do you know them? Have you met them? Is there a trusted care person that has been designated on the account? A trusted care person is a person that you authorize for your financial firm to contact in limited circumstances. My mom started going to the bank every day she went to the bank, then twice a day, then 3 times a day. Then she just didn't leave the bank. The bank manager ended up calling us and saying, we think something is wrong with mom. This was the first time really that we had anybody outside the family unit indicate that there was something up with mom. Life insurance policies, review them. Where are they? How much? Who are the beneficiaries? Maybe they set beneficiaries up 20, 30 years ago, and maybe those people are deceased. Maybe there's been divorces. Important to review. What are the passwords to the accounts? Write them down. Passwords are a difficult thing for me to remember, much less add 20, 30, 40 years on me. Write down the passwords. Safety deposit keys. The older generations, they use safety deposit boxes. Where are the keys? Go together to the bank, review the contents. Financial commitments, mortgages, rent, car, how much? When do they come out of the accounts? Last wishes. You can go in with a list, and maybe on one day you get some of them accomplished, and the next day you get some more accomplished. But these are really important discussions to have now.
What do you do if, I think this is probably the case for a lot of families, like what do you do if you ask the question and it's like a slammed door? Oh, we don't talk about these and this sort of thing in our family. This happens in many families. Like how do you get the conversation even to one question that isn't a slammed door?
Do you want me to answer that one?
Oh, sorry. Anybody. Why don't we start with you, Sarah? But anyway.
I mean, I had it easy. My parents, maybe being teachers, maybe they were more open. They still didn't want to have it. It took a bottle of wine and my brother and I sitting around the kitchen table. But they did have it. I think the best you can do is try, but perhaps Claire has other tips on how to get the conversation going. I must admit I had an easy ride of it.
Well, sometimes the door is really, really closed. And again, because I work with a population that has dementia, I mean, sometimes when the door is that closed, very, very unfortunately, it takes a crisis to happen within the family, or when the person just loses their capacity, the family has to go ahead and then have a mandate that's homologated, and it becomes very ugly, unfortunately, right? And there are some cases, as much as we want to help guide people, we can only do so much. And in my field, it takes a crisis before something were to just give, and then somebody goes, okay, where are the papers, like Sarah, everything that you just listed, it was like you said verbatim everything that I did, right? Because
Yeah.
especially like that one pager where everything is listed, when you have to make those decisions, everybody goes into like panic mode and stuff. And I don't know, in the work that I do, it takes, for those people that absolutely don't want to have those conversations, it takes somebody being hospitalized or a crisis to happen, unfortunately.
Kathy, any insights on this?
I think all of those examples are really great. Every family is, of course, very different, but often people might have their own fears, their own concerns. So if we are sometimes able to tackle what are some of the issues or the concerns and the fear, and to start again the dialogue and the conversation, it might help resolve gradually open the door, but it's a lot of sometimes persistence and patience that would be needed towards that, especially here when the doors are really closed.
Okay. Sarah, how do women in the sandwich generation find the time to take care of themselves financially? We talked about some of the documentations that need to be in place, but sometimes it can just be difficult. There's so many different things competing for their time it's just one more thing that they have to do.
Yeah, that is a good question. I'm not sure I have a great answer. Because, back to what I had said earlier, that it's 1,350 extra hours. And again, it's not like the 24-hour day just expanded to engulf those extra 1,350 hours that the average person spends in caregiving. So, the best thing I can say is you need to prioritize it. As I said earlier, financial wellness is self-care. You need to think about this, not just for the current moment that you're living through, but what happens after. When you are looking at your own retirement, you are looking at your own finances. Um, you need to prioritize it. Again, working with a financial advisor is, I mean, obviously, I work for a financial uh, wealth management firm, so I'm going to say that, but it's they are your guide, they are your friend, they are your coach, they're going to hold you accountable. They are going to sit down and plan with you. Whether you use Richardson Wealth or any other wonderful, wealth management firm in Canada, we're fortunate to have a great number of them. Find someone that you can work with, someone that you trust, someone that talks in your language, and start with that plan. And it's probably the best thing that you can do for yourself is find yourself a financial advisor that you trust and can work with.
Okay, I'm going to turn to some audience questions because there's quite a few questions here. What is a common financial planning mistake people make when planning for their elderly years? Claire, maybe we could start with you and then Sarah.
Yeah.
Sure. Underestimating the cost of care, really underestimating the cost of care. I don't think anybody could ever imagine how expensive it is. And again, for people when if you're caring for a loved one that has dementia, you really need to understand that, at the beginning of the disease, that they, like, cognitively, they look fine, everything looks fine. But, again, you have to think of it as the more the disease evolves, the higher the cost of care. So I would say that would be the answer. Don't underestimate how expensive everything is.
Yeah, that would have been exactly what I would have said. And if I can use my finger, when people retire, you go through a bit of a spending splurge. It becomes time to do the bucket list of trips. And so, from a planning perspective, we often plan for that honeymoon period where people are going, they're traveling the world, they're spending money, they're helping their kids with homes if they're fortunate enough to be in that position, and then they kind of settle down. And a lot of financial planning models actually plan so that you spend your last dollar on the day that you pass. Well, I would say that yes, you plan for that honeymoon of travel, God willing, you have great health and you can do it and you can help your children with their own finances. And then, yes, you may settle down a bit, but then it may creep up again as you do plan for long-term care and the help that you may need in your final years.
Okay, Kathy, I have a question for you. What would you say to someone who is just starting to emerge from the crisis phase of this sandwich experience? For example, re-entering their professional life, reprioritizing a young family, and trying to regain balance.
That is so important. I would say here, this is a bit tied to some of the things that we have also mentioned, in that how can I recognize my boundaries and also my limitations? So again, viewing everything on a continuum, right? If I again start feeling some of those red flags, I feel very much overwhelmed, there's mood irritability, I feel emotionally distant or emotionally detached and so on, we know that, okay, I might have here reached my limit. Also, if any physical symptoms, let's say fatigue and headache, difficulty with our sleep and everything. So recognizing our limitations ahead of time would be very helpful. Becoming here, practicing on our self-awareness, and would be very important. But looking here also at, in terms of, if we find out also if our responsibilities are starting to interfere with my ability to maintain my own health, or work performance and personal responsibilities are suffering, then I want to do an assessment here in terms of what type of support that I need and where do I need it. And here we also want to catch here, especially if we start feeling guilty or ashamed that, oh, I'm not able to keep up and so on. So we want to catch those thoughts that really are not doing justice to ourselves. So recognizing those signs, reaching out here, as we talked about, to family members, or it could be again hiring professional caregivers, setting aside for the aside financial budget, accessing community resources, becomes tremendous. It becomes an asset. Acknowledging again our own limits and knowing that this is not a weakness, right? And rather is really, how can I take this proactive way to ensure that I remain healthy, but then also an effective as a caregiver as well. So how can I work on maybe lightening my load and allowing here to provide here better care to myself and of course here others.
Thank you. Boy, there's so many questions. So maybe we can keep our responses as brief as possible. So I'm going to get through as many as we can. Does the panel have any suggestions for when both parents have dementia but are unable to acknowledge the challenges they are having and accept the types of help they need, both from family and others? Claire, I'll turn that one maybe to you.
Yeah, unfortunately, again, I see that often. So what normally happens is if the people are still living at home, inevitably somebody's going to fall, something's going to happen where one ends up in the hospital, and then it kind of like just triggers the healthcare system. But again, I mean, it's really important to talk to, like, I don't know which province the person is ranging from, but for a social worker, get the ball rolling in terms of if needed. That there is a public health care system that can help and intervene. But if they're really truly 100% against anything, again, sadly, it's going to take an event, a fall, something, a hospitalization, COVID, something for everything to start happening, and that's normally the way it happens.
Okay. This is for everybody. How can men be a part of the solution? Sarah, maybe we'll start with you.
I think, when Kathy and Claire were answering some of the other questions, I was thinking about the own journey that I had with my mom. And I would say my family was such a great source of support. I couldn't have done it without them. And I guess it's the blessing of having older kids that are still in the house. They become a support system. My husband he's also in the industry, so he had a great understanding, a depth of knowledge in terms of what we're going through. But it really, it's support. My brother was a great partner in this, and he was able to lift significantly on his end. So it wasn't all on me. It was really a shared responsibility. So men can also, participate. And when mom's calling on the phone, pick up the phone and talk to mom instead of always talking to me. My husband did that a lot. My husband would take my mom out when I just needed a minute to catch my breath. So they can absolutely participate in the caregiving and spell you off if you need to tap out.
Can I just add to that too, just to say, I think men also have a different way of communicating or hearing what we need. And I think we just have to really be clear in terms of what our needs are. My husband was also an amazing support system for me, but sometimes I guess I expected him to read my mind, and they just really need to be told. And also men have a lot of feelings. I work with a lot of male caregivers, and they hold back their tears and they hold back their emotions, but they're very, very sensitive to burnout and similar but different journeys that women go through as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question. Are there resources for advice on dementia care, not medical necessarily, but related to the decisions and planning that you have all been discussing?
Well, the McGill University Dementia Education Program, we have a wide variety of resources. So I suggest you go there and watch some of my McGill Cares webcast series. So there's a lot of that good information, as well as the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. Really lots of great information on their website as well.
Okay. One for you, Sarah. What are resources to find a financial planner, regardless of the size of your assets?
So the great news is that all of the financial planners in Canada are open for business. And I think there's lots of great qualified advisors across Canada that want to help out and have an understanding in this field. There are firms that specialize in higher net worth clients, and there are firms that specialize in, less than. Walking into a bank branch and having a conversation sometimes is a great way to start. Where you bank, They know you, and that can be a great conversation. I know at my firm, we focus on women. We focus on financial affairs and financial considerations of women. So I think we do a really good job of understanding the particular needs and expectations that women have. But I would say that there are many great financial advisors out there. One thing that women do really well is we ask for references, whether it's, we really like someone's hair, where do you get your hair done? Where I don't mean to trivialize it, but we ask our friends for, who do you deal with? Who do you like? Do you like your financial advisor? So talk to your friends, find out who they're dealing with, and then interview a few, because it will take, interviewing a few to find the right one that will work with you best.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. This is such a great topic. On behalf of the Globe and Mail, I would like to thank Sarah, Kathy, and Claire for joining us today. I would also like to thank everyone in the audience for attending and for all the great questions. And of course, I'd like to thank Richardson Wealth for supporting today's webcast. We'll be sharing a link to the recorded webcast in about 1 week. Thank you so much for tuning in, and enjoy your day.
Thank you.